Okay, thank you very much for all of that. My name is Mike Southern, and I am going to be running you through a demonstration here. Our theme, we're on week 3 of Artist Loft 101 acrylic paints. So I'm going to be using acrylics today. You are welcome to follow along and sort of do your own project as I'm working, or you can just watch it and just try to, sort of absorb the information and then go back and watch it on YouTube if you want to sort of do the actual demonstration on your own. All of the stuff, everything that you see here is going to be recorded, so you should have no trouble sort of filling in the gaps if that's how you want to do it. Okay, so thank you all for coming. And today, the first week I did a demonstration of a master copy of a painting by an artist named Franz Marc. Last week I did a drawing and painting from observation of a still life. And today what I want to do is I want to introduce the concept of what's called glazing. And that is something I'll get into in a minute. But before we get into the sort of the nuts and bolts of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it and actually painting, I do want to go over the supply list here if you're going to be following along. So what I've got here is a picture of pretty much everything that I'm going to use today. The list is here. It's kind of hard to read. But basically what it is I've got, I've used some gesso, which is what you use to kind of prime your canvas with, or your paper, or whatever you're going to be painting on. It can be paper. And then there's basically the 6, what do I have there? 6, 7, there's 7 colors. One of them's not shown. But there's the 3 primaries, red, blue, and yellow, and they can be any red, blue, or yellow as long as they're sort of, the typical bright colors like a cadmium yellow, cadmium red, ultramarine blue, or cobalt blue, something like that will work. And then there are a couple of colors which are called earth tones, and the 2 that I've chosen for this one. And if you follow along the last 2 times, you'll know my palette by now. Yellow ochre and raw umber are 2 of the earth tones that I've chosen. These are by no means the only colors that will work. You can, if you've got, obviously 20 or 30 colors, you'll have plenty to use from. I like to mix my colors as I'm going, mix my secondary colors like greens and purples and things like that. So I just confine things to the basics as far as that goes. And then in addition to the earth tones and the primaries, I've got black and white. Titanium white and Mars black are the 2 that I have on the list. But again, if you've got zinc white, or if you've got ivory black or something like that, those will also work just fine. Okay, so let's come back here. And also, this is an interactive thing. I mean, you guys can't sort of speak up and ask questions, because that would be a little awkward with 300 or 400 people asking questions at the same time. But if you want to just write a question down in the chat, Jimena will sort of read it out loud if it's sort of in keeping with what we're doing at the moment. And I'd be happy to answer questions as you're going along. So that's really kind of an integral part of this whole process. So feel free to chime in when something doesn't make sense or otherwise is confusing. Okay. So what I'm going to be working from here is I know it may have said in the description on Michael's that we're going to be using landscape. I'm actually going to be doing a still life again because what I want to show you today, it's a lot more conducive for working with the still life. So this is the setup that we're going to use, and it's purposely fairly uneventful and not terribly complicated because I really want to show that the technical things of how to apply a glaze and how to do sort of an underpainting as it's called. So the setup is fairly simple. If you want to do your own and, you know, you've got an orange and a tomato and, you know, something lying around and you want to use those, feel free to make your own setup. I guess the important thing here would be to have a few different colors in play. So I've got, you know, the orange, yellow of that orange at the bottom, and then I got red of the sauce jar, and then I've got an onion, which is more of an earthy color, sort of a golden yellow ochre-ish zone color, and then the blue background. So something simple is really what we're after for this demo. So you know, go running around the house and gather up things that are appropriate if you're looking to follow along and you don't want to work from this one. Okay, let's go right to it. So here is the setup. There is the picture up in the corner of what we're going to be painting. This is a piece of canvas, and if you see, you can sort of see the outlines of an old painting that I had under here. It was another demonstration painting that I did a long time ago. And why use a fresh piece of canvas when you can recycle old canvas that you don't have any connection to? That's always my philosophy. So what I used for that is the gesso. So this stuff here, white gesso, this is just sort of a standard issue gesso, and it's basically like white acrylic paint. So what I did is I just took a coat of this and put it on with a big wide brush like this. I mean, you can even use a house painting brush, and then just coated it. And it takes, I sat it in the sun. It took, I don't know, 15 minutes to dry. It doesn't take very long, especially if you've got a nice warm sun to speed the process up. And this is what I'm going to work on. If some of you have been with me the last few weeks, you notice that I did not stain this canvas. Sometimes I like to stain it with kind of a neutral color, like a brown or the yellow ochre, something a little bit calm to kind of tone down the brightness of the white. I haven't done it this time because there's some things that I want to show you with the white of the canvas sort of coming into play. So, Jessica, we have a question?
Yes, we do have a question. So it looks like a couple of people don't have gesso. Is it absolutely necessary, or can we work around it?
Absolutely not. If you've just got a piece of paper or a piece of wood, you can see this is old cardboard. I did on the other side gesso it, but you can really paint on anything. The gesso, what the gesso does is it makes the surface ideally receptive to either oil paint or acrylic paint. So if you wanted to paint on something like this, let me try and get something like this, like a blank one, piece of cardboard, piece of old mat board, that totally works fine. So don't feel that like gesso is a be all end all to preparing your surface. Not a problem.
And also, if the canvases are already primed, then you wouldn't need gesso, right?
Correct. Yep. If they're pre-primed, then they're good to go. Should be able to tear them out of the pad. And I like to tape mine down because you are dealing with water, and water tends to kind of warp things. That's not so much a problem with canvas, but if you are working with, or board for that matter, but if you are working on any paper product, that can be an issue. So I like to tape everything down. It also doesn't scroll all over the page too. Okay, good questions. Excellent. Let's get started. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to work from that photo, like I said, up here in the corner, and I am going to do something that is called a grisaille. That's a French word, and grise in French means gray, and I don't know what A-I-L-L-E is, probably layer, but it's the gray layer. And what it does is it's basically a black and white version of whatever you're looking at. So I'm not worried about color. I'm not worrying about, this is maybe a cadmium red with a little tiny bit of blue in it, and none of those issues come into play. I love to work in the beginning stages of any painting that I do with just values. So to that end, I am going to use black and I am going to use white. And I'm just going to get them prepped over here on the side. There's a little bit of black. And then here's my titanium white. So the palette to start with is really simple. And one thing that I would recommend as you're working here, don't use the white until you feel like you absolutely need to. It's like cream in the coffee kind of thing. It's gonna go everywhere. It's gonna stain everything, and it's all gonna go kind of in the middle color-wise. So the way I like to start this is I like to get, let me just do this. There we go. I'll get a little bit of water, and the brush that I'm using to start with is kind of a mid-sized round brush. In that, you know, all of the fibers of this particular brush are in a circle. If you can see it, yeah, from above there, it's kind of a circle like that, as opposed to something like this, which is a flat brush. I don't want to use a flat brush in the beginning stages. This is basically my drawing brush. I'm trying to draw the basic outline of things, and I'm also going to start with some water. One thing I didn't put out, which I will put out now, is this gel medium. This is something that you can use instead of water if you want to, and I later on will use it pretty heavily. In the beginning, I'll probably just have it there on hand, but I won't use it. I'll use water to start with. And the reason I use water is there's two reasons. One is it dilutes the color, so it's not quite as intense. And it also makes it really easy to flow. It's kind of more like ink. So all I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to do a little bit of drawing here, just sort of get my main shapes set up and really just kind of establish what's called the composition, which is sort of where do the different pieces of the puzzle go. So I'm doing a little drawing, not being terribly fussy about it, you know, not trying to like make a perfect line and then another perfect line, just kind of sketching it out, because all of this is going to be pretty dark. So, you know, if I make a few mistakes or whatever here, it's not a big deal to kind of correct them. And let's see here. So main shapes in pretty good shape. And now I've got this really strong dark swath of color right across here. I'll just lay that in. I think I'm actually going to go up in size to a bigger round. Let's go with this one. And that's, you know, that's something I see people do a lot, is they use a brush that's a little bit too small for what they're working on. Like right here, you know, this is all going to be dark. So I'm just going to kind of scrub this in, right? I was being a little too fussy right off the bat. So now I'm just kind of blocking things in and establishing the lights and the darks. My lightest objects are, you know, the onion, the orange, and the little bottle that I've got here. So I'm keeping those for the time being, I'm keeping those white. And then everything else is getting blocked in with kind of this middle gray, which is diluted with a lot of water. It kind of looks like an ink drawing to start with. And you'll notice that I'm not being terribly precise about what color it is, or what value it is, I should say. And that's because most of this is going to be darker at the end of the demo than what I've got it now. I'm just kind of blocking. This is kind of a good blocking in stage here. Let's put this little edge right there. All right. And it's just as I'm working here, that word that I mentioned in the beginning, that the grisaille. The grisaille was, you know, if I were to ask, you know, 10 people on the street, name the single most famous painting you've ever heard of. I'd say maybe two or three, maybe half would probably mention the Mona Lisa. So the Mona Lisa if you know that painting, which is very famous by Leonardo da Vinci, done in like right around 1500, I think it was like 1490, something like that. That painting was done with a grisaille underneath it. So that painting that you know was at one point black and white. So this sort of underpainting and the grisaille approach is something that pretty much every painter at least knew how to do up until like the mid 1800s, when Impressionism came around and they started to kind of experiment with going out of the studio and kind of, you know, getting into the landscape and doing things on site and in plein air, as they call it. But before that, the grisaille, the underpainting, the value painting, as I like to call it, because it just establishes the darks and the lights. That was the primary way that most artists in the West, anyway, and by West I mean like Europe and America and places like that, that was pretty much the only way that artists painted. And I understand why, because it's super helpful in terms of understanding how the structure of the painting works. When you think of realistic painting, what you're really talking about is in short, is giving it a good sense of light. Like, you know where the light is coming from. You know, kind of, if you're looking at a portrait, say, you know, if there's a dark side of the face and a light side of the face, you know that the light is coming from that side that has all of that light on it. So understanding the value, understanding the light and the light source was a really important task for these artists who were trying to make things convincing. You know, pre-photography, this is pretty much how images were transferred. You know, if you wanted to get a portrait of your wife or of somebody famous in your town or something like that, you didn't call the photographer, because photographers hadn't been invented, or photographers didn't exist. There was no photography. So painters were it, and they had to do, and they were in competition with a lot of other painters. So they had to really know how to do things realistically, and understanding your values is a huge part of understanding realism. Okay, so that's probably about as much as I want to do for this. I think I will go in here and do a little bit in the jar. I'll just put that lid up there. Yeah, and then I'll put a little bit of dark value on the side here. There's some highlights in here that are going to be hard to differentiate, at least in these beginning stages, so I'll just be kind of rough with them. Let's see, that seems about good. Okay, so I think this is going to be a little bit darker in kind of the interior as well. I'll do a little bit of that. So now I'm going into the kind of the so-called lighter objects and doing a little bit more differentiation between, you know, it's not just white. There's obviously some gradation there. So I'm really trying to get the overall value scheme set up. All right. Okay. I think that's pretty good. It's for a kind of a perfectionist type like me, it's really hard to just sort of stop at something like this. Normally I'd spend like, you know, an hour getting all of this right, but I'm just going to leave it like that for your sake and your sanity and mine. And I'm just going to move on to another object here. And you notice I haven't used any white yet. And that's intentional. I will get to it eventually. So I'm just establishing values. I mean, that's the important thing to understand with this stage of the painting. And the whole glazing part of things will make a lot more sense once this is finished and I get to the point where I start filling things in. Now, as I'm moving along here and as things are getting darker, I'm using less water and letting more of the paint sort of take hold. And this is allowing me to broaden my value range. I've got white and I'm starting to get black. And then in between, I've got all these sort of light values. So this works as kind of a nice black and white, almost a black and white photograph, you know, sort of eliminating all the color. And it just establishes where the lights and the darks are in an overall sense. All right. I think, put that in there. What else? Got a little, if you don't like something, you can always scrub it out. It looks like I might have to use some white there. If you do run into some things that you want to get rid of, or if you want to clean your brushes, paper towels or just a cotton rag of some sort is a good thing to have on hand. Acrylic paint is water-based, so it just takes a little dip of water, and I've got my brush kind of nice and fresh. And if the paint is still a little bit damp, you can kind of go back into it. If any of you have worked in watercolors, you know that's something you can do with watercolors. But once it dries, you're kind of stuck with it. My orange kind of looks like somebody took a big bite out of it here, but I'll just roll with that. It's fine. It's not too far from the truth of it being a fruit. Let's round it out a little bit. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start mixing up. I really want these objects to be the bright ones. So I'm going to start mixing up a gray, and I'm not going to use water for this. I'm going to start using some of this medium here. Medium is basically, think of it as heavy water. It does the same thing as water. It kind of dilutes the paint a little bit. And it also makes it more transparent. So you can get a little bit of what's happening underneath kind of shining through if you put more of this stuff in there. And so I'm going to make this pretty transparent in the beginning. So I've got myself sort of a light gray. I'm just going to come in here and just establish that. Actually, I'm going to go over here because which one was the driest? Let's see. Now they're all kind of wet. It's a disadvantage of an hour-long demo. Kind of got to work fast. I'm just going to go for it. Still a little damp. So what this is doing is it's giving my paint a little bit more what's called working time. It allows, because acrylics dry really fast. That's sort of a theme that I've hit on here as I've done these demos the last few weeks. It allows me to blend paints a little bit. So I'm going to start getting a little bit more specific about some of my values and the transitions from light to dark. So as you can see here, this is sort of a transition zone. This is kind of a little darker right here. And then here, it's sort of blending with this lighter gray. And I'm trying to kind of unify those in a fairly even way.
Mike, we have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
The first one is from Janet. So she's asking what kind of medium, because she's noticed, several varieties.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of varieties out there. This is sort of the standard issue Artist Loft brand stuff, and it's called slow drying blending gel medium. You can also see it called matte medium. You can see satin medium. As long as it's acrylic gel medium, it'll do similar things as to, as to what I'm doing now. So if you, if you don't know which to get, just sort of get a sort of a standard matte medium. There are other brands out there that, but they're all basically the same thing. Just look for something that's an acrylic gel medium, and it will do the trick.
Perfect. And could you go over what you're doing again? Are you using black paint with gel medium to get those grays, or is it just black and white paint?
Yeah, so this is black, this is white, and this is the gel medium. And the more gel medium I put, it basically, this is like water. The gel medium here is like water. So it kind of dilutes it a little bit, makes it a little more transparent, which is good for blending, because if you put something that's really super heavy and super opaque, it can be a little bit difficult to get that transition going as well as you want. So yeah, it's a mix of all three is the short answer.
Perfect. And finally, Michael would like to know what paint is better, watercolor paint or gel paint?
Gel paint. Well, there's watercolors. What I'm using is technically called acrylic paint. So you can't really use, I mean, you probably could if you wanted to. Most people do not use acrylics and watercolor paint together. This is a water-based paint, but it is not considered watercolor. So watercolor is a completely different medium, but it is the only similarity really it has with acrylic paint is that they're water-based. So I would strongly recommend that you use one or the other, not in combination with each other. I hope that answered your question.
I think so, yes, thank you.
All right, now I'm just using some pure white here to kind of firm up some of the shapes a little bit. So I just want to kind of get back that bite that got chewed out of my orange. Although that would be a really, not painful, but uncomfortable bite of fruit if you did a full-on orange. All right, so there we go. And then over here, I've got a nice big highlight right here that I want to put in. So I'm using straight white. So this is really opaque, opaque meaning you can't see through it. It's not translucent. And I'm just going to build that up right here. Just kind of blend it out from that point. Okay, so you can see the kind of range of values here. And I need to do that with my orange. This is good that I can see it. Do something like that.
So Mike, John would like to know if you want to give your painting a fog effect, what medium or technique would you use?
A fog effect? Is that what that? So a fog, and that's an interesting question, is what would probably technically be called a scumble. And a scumble, so a glaze, which is what I'm going to show you in a minute, is a darker color put over a lighter color. And that changes it. A scumble is when you put a lighter color over a darker color. And that's often what a fog effect will do. And if you actually want to see that, probably the next couple of weeks, I'm going to do exactly that, create sort of some foggy scumbles. And what that does, I would use the gel medium just the way I'm doing it, but I would do it with a light color over a dark color, sort of the reverse of what we're going to do today. And it works great. It's really good for like landscapes because you can, sort of draw the mountains in the background, draw the mountains in the middle ground, and the mountains in the foreground, sort of similarly. But then if you add a scumble to those background mountains, it will push them back in space. It will sort of operate as a way of creating what's called atmospheric perspective, but using these materials is perfect for those kind of effects. So yeah, that was a good one. That was a good question. All right. So I'm thinking, you see any more highlights that I'm missing here? Maybe just throw a little bit in there. Just give it that sort of glowy, kind of glass reflected kind of thing. All right. I'm thinking that's pretty good. Okay. So now one of the most important things when you're doing glazes is each layer needs to dry before you put the next layer on. So I have to move away from this and do something different.
Mike, before you move away from that, we have a question about how do you get your orange and onion or any round object really to have a dimensional effect as opposed to
well,
that one?
Hopefully you saw how, I mean, I'm thinking these look pretty rounded, but you need to have that full range of values. So you need to have a highlight, you need to have middle tones, and you need to have darker tones. I could probably darken this a little bit, and I may when I get to the glazing stage. Same thing here, sort of a little bit darker here, more of a middle tone, and then the light highlights. So just be aware of how that light is hitting an object. These are great objects to practice on. Round objects, also kind of more squarish cube. I don't have anything sitting around, but like, you know, just like a little shoebox where you've got maybe, or you can see my hand, like one side's got the light on it, the other side's got the shadow on it. Any object that you put that has a light source close by is going to have a lit up side and a more dark or shadow side. And with something that's round, it's a gradation. So it's light, middle, dark gradation. Same thing here. This one has more sort of strong highlights because it's a reflective surface. So noticing where that light is hitting and how it spreads out across the surface is really the key to understanding how to make things look volumetric, round, and have some, you know, real strong mass to it. So yeah, that's a great question, is getting your sense of light and sense of values established. I'm just looking at this and I'm trying to kill a little bit of time. So I'm going to go back and go with this real washy black, which is the quickest drying part of it. Because this stuff here, this medium, will slow the drying time of acrylic paints. So you kind of have to factor that in. So I'm just going to add a little bit of a darker shadow here. I can kind of blot it out if it's not behaving as well as I'd like. Yeah, just because you put a mark down does not mean that mark has to stay there. It should be a sort of a constant kind of negotiation between what your brain is telling you of, you know, does that make sense? Is that working? Is that kind of strange? Does it look a little bit too heavy, too dark, too light? You know, just constantly use your eye. I think a lot of people, when they start out, they kind of rely on photographs to give them good information. Your eye is far better at differentiating between light and dark and color shifts and things like that than a camera would ever be. You know, unless it's made by really smart people at MIT or something like that, where it's you know, got beyond human capabilities. But most information that you need to understand value and color and everything else that's involved in painting is best suited to your eye, to direct observation. So the quicker you get in the habit of kind of training yourself to use that built-in tool, the better your paintings are going to be. Draw from life, paint from life.
And we have another question from John.
Yeah.
How would you use a medium to get a glowing effect, let's say like around a full moon?
Oh, yeah, that would be something that anything where you need kind of a gradual, you know, a gradual kind of halo effect the medium is really good for that. Because the problem with just straight paint is it tends to be a little bit too strong. Sometimes you want it. Sometimes you really want that, you know, that touch. But usually that, as you saw when I was doing it here, that's the last thing you do. But those you know, those gradations, those gradual fade outs in light in something like, you know, a Ring Around the Moon or something like that is perfect for this, because it takes what you've already put down and kind of integrates it into the marks that you're making. So it's a kind of a nice blending. I mean, that's why they call it sort of a blending medium, is it allows you that time to work on that. So let's see how we're doing here. Still a little tacky. So what I'd like to show you now is I'm just going to do a couple of quick little, I may sit this over here in the sun to speed it up. Let's do that. Perfect. So I'm just going to take one of these here, and I'm going to show you kind of the basics of how glazing works. These are so new, I haven't even uncorked them. They got little safety, you know, like out of a Tylenol can or something like that, just in case people want to tamper with your paints, I guess. So I'm just going to put out my 3 primaries here. So the red, the yellow, and the blue. These are the what do they call them? The academic level. So it's like student grade paint. So as if you were here before, you heard me mention that last time I was using the professional grade. These just have a little less pigment and they're a little bit more transparent. They're still really good paints, but they're cheaper. So for probably 75% of what you would do in a kind of a complicated painting, you know, these academic level paints would be perfectly fine. If you find that you're not able to get sort of really intense color, you might want to switch to sort of a professional grade. But I'd say if you're new to painting, just get the student grade stuff and it'll be perfectly fine for what we're certainly for what we're going over today and for most painting situations that you'll run into. Okay, so I'll do a little close up here. Do a little. So I'm going to show you basically what is involved in glazing. So I'm just going to take a couple strips of color here. I'm going to do a little red. This is straight paint. There's a tiny bit of residual water left over, but for the most part, it's just kind of straight paint right out of the tube. And I'll do a little blue, ultramarine blue to be precise. And just sort of building up a nice kind of solid strip of color there. And last but not least, I'll do the yellow. So if we're measuring values here, I've kind of put the darkest color in the middle, and then sort of the middle color or the middle value color, the red, onto the left, and then the yellow down here. Okay. So that's pretty much dry. So putting straight paint down without any medium on it, that is a sort of typical acrylic drying time. It does not take long at all. And I'm actually going to put out one more here. I'm going to take some, this is yellow ochre. So this color here, and I'll just do another one just to add a little variety so they're not all sort of bright colors, bright primaries. So I'll just do one more down here. So yellow ochre. There we go. So I've got 4 different colors here on a white background. And what I want to do is I want to show you what glazing really is all about. Glazing is putting one color over, glazing or scumbles is putting one color over another in a sort of diluted medium, gel medium in our particular case. I'm going to go up a little bit so you can see what I'm pulling from here. There we go. Let me just solidify that a little bit. There we go. All right, so I'm going to pull, let me just go, let me do a little switcheroo here so that picture gets out of the way. There we go. So now you can see the colors and you can see my little strips here. So I'm going to take a little bit of, so this is pretty much dry. Hopefully it stays that way. I'm going to take some medium. I'm actually going to take a lot of medium. So I would say probably about half. And I'm just going to do yellow first off. So this is, I'm essentially diluting the yellow. So the yellow is not as strong. The other thing that's happening here is yellow by its nature is not a very strong color to start with. It has what's called low tinting strength. So it takes a lot of it to make an effect on the color that it's interacting with. So I'm really mixing it together with the medium because I want to dilute it pretty well. And I'm just going to run this. Let me just do it right across here. So over there, it's pretty, let me get up closer. So you can see this yellow and this yellow are very different. This is a much lighter yellow. I think I need to put more yellow in there. I didn't have enough. Try a little bit more. And this is something you'll do. You just sort of tweak, you'll sort of tweak the ratio a little bit. So I put a little bit more pigment in there, a little less medium. Okay, that's better. And so what I've done, get up close, through the magic of glazing, I'll just bring it up here. I've essentially created orange. So the two colors, you know, people ask, well, how do you make an orange? Or, you know, you can mix the two colors together, or you can start with a red layer of paint and then come in with a glaze of yellow over top of it. And you can kind of keep going a little bit to get the saturation that you want. All right. And now none of that red has mixed. This is still pretty much just straight yellow on my brush. And I'm going to do the same thing, get a little bit of paint here, a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to go over the blue. Blue generally has a stronger tinting strength. Everything has a stronger tinting strength than yellow, but yellow and blue will make green. Trying to get it a little bit more uniform. This might be an instance where if I take a different brush, and I'm going to, so I'm going to take a flat brush here. There it is. I'm going to try it with a flat brush to get my layer a little bit more even. And all these brushes I've been using here are what are called synthetic Sable brushes. And Sable brushes were originally made out of the bristles from a sable, which is a type of mink. It's in the weasel family. So it's much smoother and much softer. Bristle brushes were usually made from hog or horses or something like that, like horsehair and things like that, a little rougher. That's not ideal for glazing. So there's a nice even swatch creating a little bit of green. So that's the idea behind glazing. Let's just get it better. Come on, there we go. So you're interacting these two layers with each other. And that is sort of the purpose of glazing. When with the grisaille, which I did and should be dry now. Let's go check. This process here, the grisaille, I'm going to go back out again. Bear with me. Go back up. Okay. There we go. Back in business here. This is really where glazing, and it's pretty good shape. This is where glazing essentially was invented. This is what it was made for. You would do a kind of a monochromatic underpainting, and then you would glaze the colors over top of it. So I'm going to just do this big area here of the, and let me switch back to the to one with the picture up there. I'm going to do this area here in red. So all of this is pretty good. So now I'm going to take a nice big flat brush, and I'm just going to use straight red, I think it's called Cadmium Red hue, or no, it's actually Brilliant Red. I don't even know what Brilliant Red is, but it's like stop sign red. I'm used to like the, you know, Cadmium Red or Ultramarine Blue. Brilliant Red is probably a mix of a few different colors combined. So I'm getting a nice bead of this on there, getting some red on. So I would say the mix here is probably about 50-50. It's a good place to start. And I am just going to essentially put the sauce in the jar. And hope that this is all pretty dry.
Mike, we have a question about the drying process, actually. Yep. Would you recommend using a heat gun or blow dryer to speed up the process?
Yeah, if you're in a pinch, that absolutely works. It works great for watercolor as well. Yeah, you certainly can.
Perfect. And another question we have from Pam is the gel medium the only thing we can use to create a glazing effect, or are there other options?
If you're in a pinch, I could do the same thing that I'm doing here with water, and I have done it before and it works. I just feel like I get a little bit more control with this. It's a little bit smoother. It's a little bit more even, but absolutely water works. And to be fair, the glazing process, so if you're interested in this, if you go, ooh, this is pretty cool, I'd love to learn more about this. In the next couple of weeks, I'll be doing one where I start the painting in acrylics, and then I transition to oil paints. And oil paints is really where glazes shine. It's a process that was made for oils and is best suited to oils. And the reasoning behind that is, as I'm doing this, you know, stuff is kind of drying and getting a little tacky. So your glaze is not quite as even as if I were using oil paints. So I'm gonna show a similar demonstration in the next couple of weeks, which uses acrylics to start with, and then transitions into oil for the bulk of the glazes. So I've got a pretty good read here on these values and glazes over top of the values. And this is the one thing I think that hopefully you're seeing out of this is all I'm doing is I'm just coloring in stuff that I've already painted. I'm not doing any more darks. I'm not doing any more lights. I'm not concentrating on value at all at this stage. I'm just adding the color. And it is clearly not as dark as I need it to be, but the simple thing would be to let this dry and build up another layer of red. And over time, it will increase the intensity, increase the saturation, the brilliance of that red, and you will get a much richer, a much more intense feel from, you know, the underlying value study that you've already established in black and white, and then the reds that you add layer upon layer will make the color much more vibrant and much more brilliant. You will, as you add more layers, because it will start to cover things up, you will have to add like some darker areas down here. And let's see if I can get away with that. So what I would do is maybe mix up what's called a shade. That's too much black. I have to tone that down. So I'm just taking the red and the black and mixing it together. And then again, diluting it with some, there we go, that's a little better. Diluting it with some of this. And then I can come in here and add this glaze. Ideally, I would let this dry a little bit longer, but you know, like I said, you do what you got to do in an hour-long demo. And so I'm just adding a little bit of darkness over here. Let's see, maybe a little bit in here as well. So you can see it's starting to get some volume to it. It's starting to get some roundness, some depth, some realism, whatever you want to call it. And I'll just sort of tell you a little story of, I'm not trained as a painter. I went to art school for a printmaker. And printmaking, or also called the graphic arts, was oftentimes executed in black and white. So the way I saw images was through value to start with. And so I learned this way of painting, which is really not taught. You know, if you go to art school and say, oh, I want to learn how to do, you know, an underpainting and then do glazing and stuff like that, they'll kind of look at you sideways and go, well, what is that? Because it's not taught anymore. So I kind of had to teach myself this, but it was the most, is the thing that made the most sense to me. I understood things in terms of understanding the values, and then adding the color over top of it. So it kind of compartmentalizes the problems of painting into steps that you can digest a little bit more fully. So that's how I sort of, I would say maybe stumbled into this way of painting. It's certainly taken quite a resurgence in the last few years or so. It's become more popular, but you do have to search it out. So I've got a few minutes left here. Feel free to ask questions, and I'll just lay in this. Yeah, it's nice and dry now. So I'm just going to lay in this yellow, clean that off. I'm probably going to go to a smaller brush, maybe that one that I used in the beginning. It's already got some yellow.
So Teresa says she loves the technique and loves the muted color.
Oh, great. Yeah. It's a really, when I did my first glaze, it was kind of like a magic trick. Because everything's there to make this volume, like have volume. And then you add the color to it and it's like, oh, there it is. It's starting to look like a painting. I mean, it's not done, but the kind of the base of what I need to make it work as a painting is there. I'm adding the color now, but having that value established really, really lets you see where you're headed, I think, a little bit more clearly. So yeah, thanks for that. Just keep adding a little bit more. And, you know, I usually like to start at about 50-50, but feel free, you know, like if it's too heavy, if it's too yellow, if it's too light, you can adjust it. I mean, certain colors, like if I were using my professional grade colors, I might have to put a little bit more of the medium in there, because they tend to be a little bit more vibrant colors just from a starting point. And as you're doing this, you know, you can kind of incorporate, I mean, it's not just straight yellow. for this orange. I mean, clearly you're going to have a little bit of red eventually. So you could, here, I'll just do this as the final little thing. I'll just take a little bit of this red, just a little bit, sort of a lighter one, because it's predominantly yellow. Maybe throw a little bit of that in there.
So Mike, Mary's asking if you'll be posting this or the finished product online. So
I certainly can. I've done it the last few weeks. I don't actually know where it ends up though. This is a brand, I have to say, this is a brand new program. So I think we're kind of working out the kinks, but keep asking questions like that. You know, you can't really put comments on the YouTube page. But yeah, just keep those suggestions up. And the more we hear it, the more I think that it'll get done. But yeah, I will send this through. I'm probably, this would take a long time for me to kind of really finish. One of the sort of the famous Renaissance painters of all time is Titian from Venice. He had sort of a famous saying of his, and it was in Italian, but I'll translate. It was velaturas 30 40, which means glazes 30, 40. So, you know, really building these up, really building these layers up is the key to kind of building the richness of these paintings. And if you go, you know, if you go to any museum and you see a painting by somebody like Jan van Eyck or Albrecht Dürer or Leonardo da Vinci or Raphael or any of those sort of heavy hitters of the early Renaissance and the High Renaissance, these paintings glow. And the reason for that, it's not just like some mystical thing. It's actually an optical thing that happens, because what's happening is the light's going down through all of those layers of paint that you've put down, through the you know, the underpainting here, down to that grisaille, especially these strong white areas. It's going all the way down there and then reflecting back out, because white reflects color. It's going back through. So it's got sort of this inner glow to it that if I were to use pure opaque paint, the paint just goes down and immediately bounces back up. This gets absorbed into the painting and then punches its way through those layers because they're so thin, and they have this sort of inner glow to it. Okay, and we'll look at that. We're right at 1 minute to the hour, and right on the hour. That was great. I really enjoyed that. This is my wheelhouse. I love stuff like this. I'm going to do something similar next week, like I said, starting with acrylics and then transitioning into oils. So I'd love to see you all next week. But this is pretty much the conclusion of this week's demo. And thank you all for coming.
Sorry, I mean, we don't have any more questions, I'm sorry. But everybody's saying how much they enjoyed it and how much they learned, and they're looking forward to your next class.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to having you. And I'm going to try and do a landscape next week. So if you do want to come along, if you can work from a photograph, if you want to get a painting by, you know, sort of an artist that you like and bring it along and do a copy with that. It doesn't really matter, but I'll just sort of be running you through the different applications that you can take with this, this whole glazing and underpainting approach. The indirect approach to painting is what it's broadly called. Okay, folks, thank you so much. And Jimena, you're in charge of saying goodbye or shutting things down. So I'll just wave goodbye. And hope to see you all next week. It was great having you.
Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you on other Michael's classes. Bye.